Hi, everybody. You're hanging out with Joe, Leo, Leonardo, and Alexander Turbin. We're comic books from coast to coast. I'm out here on the West Coast, and I'm hanging out with my buddy Alexander way over there on the East Coast. And we're going to be looking at probably one of the most important artists to ever sit down and do comics, as well as one of the greatest creators, as well as one of the people who consummately created maybe even the most comic book, like maybe him and John Byrne, the guys that like sat down and did the most pages ever. But the absolute king of comic books, the amazing Jack Kirby.
Yeah. We this is actually our second attempt at making this video, and it's going to go with a. We're going to do another video. We're going to choose another artist and go through him. But we are feeling that Jack the King Kirby needed more than just a split video with another artist. We're not just going to give him 10 minutes and then be on our merry way. He is like you're saying. He probably. I cannot really think of another artist that has had more of an impact on comic books. He has just created so many characters. Like you were saying about John Byrne, he might have had as many pages. I still kind of don't think so, but no way has he come close to creating the amount of characters that Jack Kirby has. Nobody has.
Yeah, and with the new movie, the Fantastic Four film coming out, they're trying to deliver some sort of version of the Jack Kirby, Fantastic Four on film. And, it's time to just kind of stop and, just take a look at some of the things that made his work remarkable and, what just the insane contribution he made to the entire art form and, the bravery of his art, like is some of the things I was thinking of. And it's going to sound weird and corny from like, a layman's perspective or whatever, you know what I mean? But it's like, so like I'm a guy who draws a lot. You're a guy who draws a lot,
Yeah.
But say like Jack Kirby, you're a guy who draws, you mostly aspire to draw from your mind, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Your
Yeah.
imagination. And I am a guy who mostly, I draw from a lot of reference. I reference other comic books, I reference photographs, you know what I mean? I reference films and stuff like that, so I require a lot of reference to draw. But like, in these early books and these guys, where like, like say originally, I want to say comic books is not really treated like a medium where they're looking for a photographic idea. You know what I mean? Like, how it's
Right.
kind of transferred to that now? Like now it's almost at a level to where they try to get a certain amount of like cinematic sort of like photographic realism out of the art. Everybody wants that sort of really push forward style. And, they like it. Everything needs to look in perspective and look real and stuff, But, in these early comic book guys, they're cranking this stuff out so fast, and there's this sort of like bare bones down version of reality that they create. You know what I mean? Like it's not real.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
you know
And
what I mean?
it's not too cartoony either.
Yeah, it's like this balance of it. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like the
Yeah.
anatomy isn't real. You know what I mean? The
Yeah. Yeah.
musculature isn't real. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
the perspectives are not real. Like so
Yeah.
much of it is just faked. And
Let's get this out of the way first. Are you a big fan of Jack Kirby's art?
well, I can't say that I'm a big fan. Whereas, because when you're I never looked at anything he did and tried to incorporate into my art.
Right. Right.
And that's
Right.
what I would say is when you're saying like I'm a fan of this, like what you're
Right.
really saying is like I want my material to have this same appearance or whatever,
Right.
which
Right.
I
Right.
don't
Right.
necessarily do, at all,
Yeah.
really.
Yeah.
But
I'm in the same boat. I'm not a huge if like Jack Kirby fans are kind of crazy where they will they're not crazy, but like anybody who's a real fan of something, they will go out of their way to get massive amounts of it. They'll go out and get Thor #1 or Fantastic Four #1 and spend a lot of money and stuff. And you know, I'll do that to a certain extent, you know, within my budget. But I'm not really that much of a fan of Kirby. Like he's probably in my, I don't think he's even in my top 20 favorite artists, comic book artists.
Yeah, like I've never really, nah, he's definitely not any of my favorite
Yeah,
comic book artists, you know, but him as a comic book artist is
yeah,
like impossible to overlook, you know what I mean?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
And you don't get to any of the people that I think is awesome
yeah.
without
Of course not.
stepping on that step, you know what I mean? That is
Yeah,
him, you know what I mean? Like
yeah,
it's like a
yeah,
staircase, right? So like you've got all these stairs that lead to the top of the stairs, right? But there's
yeah.
4 or 5 stairs at the bottom that if they don't connect to the stairs at the top, you don't have a staircase. You know what I mean, dude? Like, you
I
know.
think it's probably more like a brick wall. But I mean, I understand your analogy.
Yeah, yeah. Either way, you
It's
know,
straight
sure,
on.
whatever. You know, it's like,
Yeah,
yeah, like you cannot overlook those ones at the bottom because if you pull those
yeah,
out, the whole thing at the top crumbles.
yeah,
You know what I
yeah,
mean, dude?
yeah.
Like,
Without Jack Kirby, there's no Neil Adams.
yeah,
That's for
there's
sure.
no Jim Lee, there's no Walter
John,
Simonson, you
yeah,
know, there's
yeah. There's no John Byrne.
yeah,
Yeah,
there's no
yeah.
John
You're right.
Byrne for sure. You know what I mean? For sure. Because the first John Byrne stuff I ever saw was a Fantastic Four. You know, they showed this on an episode of Kayfabe, and he had sent in like his first submission, I guess, was like a full issue of Fantastic Four that he drew or whatever, you know.
Oh yeah,
And it is drawn in like this the full on Jack Kirby. You know, he's just
yeah,
aping
yeah,
Jack Kirby fully, you know,
yeah.
like
Yeah, I mean, there's so many things in his art that probably still today, like his technology is super Kirby. Is whenever he draws any kind of technology, like you know, spaceships or whatever like that, is super Kirby.
yeah, you know, like the things like say the things that you take away from his art, right? You know, and here's all the things that like kind of stick with me like throughout the years was like this thing he does with the let's see, where's a good shot? Here's a pretty good one with the female's hair where they just have this
Yeah,
sort of helmet, you know what I mean?
yeah, yeah.
That you know it works and a pseudo doesn't work, you know,
Well,
you know,
like I've said so many times before, a lot of that is the inker. A lot of that is the inker. I mean, there were some inkers out there that at the time that would just, you know, schlock through, you know, just go as fast as they could or whatever.
well this is
What is
Jim
that you're
Taylor.
looking? What is that you're looking at? And who's
This
the
is
inker?
this is you know I think it's a reprint of a classic Fantastic Four story. This is Marvel's greatest comics, you know, Fantastic Four.
Yeah,
But Joe Sinnott on the inks, and I know he was pretty well, you know, like regarded as far as being like one of Kirby's better inkers, from what I
yeah,
understand.
yeah.
And it's a
Um,
great looking book. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, these shots, you know, I mean, they're really cool. Like this little
yeah,
splash right here
yeah,
with you know, I mean, like, and see, this is the other thing I was gonna say too. It's like it's the male face and the okay, those are always two issues for me anyways, is the male face and the female face. And like I have this ardent need to like for them to always be like a certain level of handsomeness or prettiness or whatever, you know.
yeah,
And I
yeah,
think that okay, like say, and my work alone. And like, you know, I get that, say, from like Wals Portacio or Jim Lee or Mark Silvestri, which are probably the guys that, you know, like I model, you know, my look at the most, we'll say. But like
yeah,
you track it all the way back to here, you know, and he has the same sort of thing where he has these like generic supermodel faces, you know what I mean, for his
yeah,
era, you know,
yeah,
and everybody has that sort of same face, you know, just with slightly different hairdos and that kind of thing or whatever. And you know, like it's early tracking things like that. It's like the face, the way it just like has that incomprehensible, this is a Jack Kirby face, you know. The
yeah,
hair has that thing, and then the other thing that really stuck with me is his polish, the way he does the shine polish or whatever, like say like right
yeah,
here on like
yeah,
a
yeah,
stretchy Mr. Fantastic hand, you know what I mean? And
yeah,
you get
yeah,
that classic. See, you know, like I was pretty bummed like when I saw that they're doing the John Byrne, you know, white neck, you know, suits for the Fantastic Four film, you know what I
oh
mean?
yeah, the light blue. Yeah,
I was kind of bummed out that they didn't do the super shiny, you know what I mean, super slick jumpsuit, you know, thing from the early books, you know what I mean? Like that's really what I wanted to see, you know, like, and I don't mean like the ones from the 90s movies that look all
Right.
jumpsuity. I
Oh,
mean,
right,
like they
right.
should look like, dude, it should look like that last thing Alex Ross just did, with the Fantastic Four. I don't know if you looked at that. But it's like Alex Ross did this painted, beautiful version of, I think it's a sequel to This Man, This Monster.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I didn't get it, or like I looked for it, but couldn't get my hands on it. So I'm still trying to track that one down. But
Huh.
man, it just looks so gorgeous. And like the way he did their costumes in this sort of like super shiny, super high gloss, like, just slightly like baggy jumpsuit, sort of 60s spacesuit kind of thing or whatever. And it just really looked like, the Jack Kirby language, but, in a very realistic, photorealistic kind of like version of it or whatever.
Yep. That's an awesome panel on top.
It is.
That's classic Kirby right
It
there.
is.
He,
And,
he's one of the greatest foreshorteners ever of all time.
well, like that's what I mean. Like when you say his language is just like it's
Yeah.
like part of. It's like he has this innate ability to like fake it so far that it just gathers
Yeah.
this reality to it or whatever. You know
It's
what I
like
mean?
this,
Like
like this panel here with Thor throwing the tree trunk or whatever at a tank. I mean, look at that.
and
His
it's just
foreshortening is crazy.
yeah, it's coming right at you. You know what I mean? And then
Yeah.
and then he gets so much in that panel right next to where the tank is actually being hit. It's a small
Yeah.
panel, but there's you
Yeah.
know what I mean. It's all there, dude. And that's always like honestly, like that's not something I have even really tried to do yet. Is like I've never done a like a 6 panel grid page or something like that where you have to really put all the information in those
Yeah.
little panels. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I've never done that before, dude. Like that's probably I'm saving that challenge for somewhere in the near future because, like,
Yeah.
like as a guy who draws comics, you like everybody wants to sort of like try those techniques and see like what you would be doing if you were put under the pressure like that. I didn't really learn comics like that. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I learned it much more like the John Byrne school or whatever, or like the Neil Adams school is like kind of where I picked up on it. You know what I mean? So like my whole idea of how to lay out a page and stuff is like really far away from something like this, like or like that Thor you're looking at right now, like
When
I don't
you
think
when you lay
about
out a all do all of the panels all at once on the page, or do you go like one panel and then draw and then another panel and the draw?
well like say here's some thumbnails of my stuff right here, you know what
Oh,
I
so
mean?
you do thumbnails. See, I don't do
Mhm.
thumbnails at all.
No, I totally do a thumbnail or whatever. Like this is the
Yeah.
page I was just working on or whatever, you know what I mean? And like this is remember how I just showed you that shot of the Admiral or whatever, like
Yep.
like this is, like that's that shot right there, like
Yeah. Yeah.
and then the doctor's talking over here, you know what I mean? And like, so I do a pretty comprehensive thumbnail first, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
and once I have the layout looking right, I mean, you can see how far I take it. Like, it's not so far where you're like, I'm not doing like, what, like Dave Gibbons or whatever, like in Watchmen or something, you know what I mean? If you've ever seen like what his thumbnails look like, they're like
Yeah. Really
essentially,
intricate.
yeah, they're like they're like, he's drawing the page as a tiny miniature thing, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it's a
Yeah.
trip, dude. Like, some guys can do that. I saw Joe Madureira, and he draws his pages super small, dude. Like, he draws his pages almost just a little bit bigger than real comic book pages. And then, like, he'll draw like 4 of them on one normal size 11 by 17. You know what I mean? You'll get 1, 2,
Does he
3, 4 pages.
does he blow it up afterwards?
Yeah, then they blow it up afterwards. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
That's
was like,
what
that's
I think Simonson does
crazy.
that sometimes too.
Dude, I don't see how you could draw that good, that small. You know what I mean? Like, my
Yeah.
hand's too shaky to draw that small and be that good. I wish.
Yeah. 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 Well, I think that it gives you the initial blocking in the characters and stuff like that. I think
Yeah,
is
it's just to get
maybe
down to
what
that
they're
level.
aiming for.
Yeah, just trying to get to that level of detail that small is so hard for me.
Yeah.
Like you heard me complain about like, it's like I really love the cover for Alliance #1, but I just wish I could have done a better job on, getting those figures looking tight, because I'm
Right.
just so bad at those small figures, it's just hard for me. I admire those guys like George Perez who could pack, and Jack Kirby who could pack, 15 people into a panel and it all looks good and they all look right, like
Right. Right. Right.
super hard to
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
Oh
Yeah.
man, that
Definitely is.
cover, that's cool right there.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he's done, the thing is, Jack Kirby has done so much stuff that even if like 10% of it, 20% of it, 30% of it isn't good, there's just so much other fantastic stuff. It's like when they say there's 1,000 bad pages in you. It really isn't. There really isn't 1,000. You don't like draw 1,000 bad pages and then get onto your good page. It's more like draw 20 pages that are mediocre and then draw one fantastic page. I
Yeah,
think anyway. I mean,
yeah, no, I
there's
agree.
artists. Yeah, yeah. So
Because
it's
like, yeah,
definitely not linear.
I have, you know what I mean? Like I have drawings that I've done like, I guess I started to guess maybe like 3 or 4 years ago now I started up again. And I have some of those, some of the ones I did right when I had started up again are like still insanely popular. Like I still get like a lot of
Yeah,
likes anytime I put them up. And I feel like people like, even sometimes when I look at them, I'll be like, dang, how come I can never get something quite this good again? You know what I mean? You're just like,
yeah,
I really
yeah. A
crushed
lot of
this one
times,
drawing. Like,
yeah, yeah. A lot of times I look at previous work and I'm like, how did I do that? I don't remember, doing something that good like that. I think the funk cover, I think that's one of the best things that I've ever done. And I'm just like, how did I do that?
that is a great cover, man. But, I think, like, I personally feel like, working with somebody good elevates you. You know what I mean?
Oh
And
yeah, yeah,
I don't
definitely.
just mean like having someone else, diddle over your art. I just mean like, being involved with other artists, seeing other people, what other people are doing, watching other people push themselves to new levels and stuff. It's very inspirational. And, we come off of these kicks across each other. And, you know what I mean? Like, we draw a couple pages from a book, or maybe we help someone else out with another couple pages, and the book comes out and it looks great, and we're all like stoked, and everybody just keeps getting a little bit better and a little bit better by pushing themselves.
Yeah,
Um, the guy who does like the Sally Starfighter stuff, like
yeah,
Alan, I can't think of
yeah.
his name. But man,
Yeah, Alan
like
Robin
yeah, Alan Robin, yeah, he's really
Robinson.
grown quite a bit since he started. You know what I mean? Like since his very early Tory stuff or whatever, don't mess with
Yeah,
Tory or whatever he was doing in Soaked in Blood, and
yeah,
his stuff just keeps getting better and better. I just keep, Paul Courtjohn, his stuff is getting, really good. He's pushing around a lot of different mediums. Like I think your latest work, the Morgrim, the Cyclops, is
yeah,
easily probably the best comic book you've put out, at least the very best looking for sure. Like as
yeah,
far as the balance of color and how professional it all looks and how nicely it's all printed. Is it
yeah.
perfect? Nope. Are there any of us perfect yet? No, probably not.
No,
But
no, nobody's perfect.
yeah,
Even like we're talking about Jack Kirby, he went through quite a few periods, maybe not quite a few, but a few periods of when people didn't really like his art. Like, a lot of the DC stuff that he did
I
when
was
he
just
came
gonna
from
say that.
Marvel,
Yeah, I know that, when
was failures.
they changed all his Superman faces. You know what I mean? Like you can't really find any of the Jack Kirby drawings of Superman that have the actual face he put on it, because they would always white it out and freaking have one of their DC, go-to
Can
guys
you
just redraw the face.
can you imagine some dude telling you to redo a Jack Kirby face?
Wild, right? Wild.
Like,
And redrawing
how
it.
would you not do it? I mean, you got to do it. You want to get paid, but
That's just sad, dude. I wouldn't do it without Xeroxing it and keeping it first. I know that. You know what I
yeah,
mean? Like, I
yeah,
wouldn't even do
yeah,
it. You know what I would do is personally is I would redraw it on another piece of paper and tape it down on top of it. You know what I mean? I would ink it, cut it
yeah,
out, and tape it down and set it on top. That's what I would do.
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
oh no, you know what I mean? I wouldn't re-ink something, yeah, or like white out and redraw, like, you know, that's crazy, you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But you
But I
know,
mean,
like those,
he had other times, you know, after he was doing Captain America, and you know, before Marvel, he was kind of going through a rough time, and people didn't really want to buy his artwork and stuff. So everybody goes through ups and downs of their artwork. You know,
it's like,
doesn't matter
you
who
know,
you are.
it's like it's so easy to like sort of like cast a judgment on it, you know what I mean? And just be like,
Yeah,
okay, so you like, you know, if you're looking at, you know, something modern, like the way, like, you know, like, you know, just whatever, a modern style, and compare it to an older style. And of course, it's like, you know, okay, maybe the older style looks, you know, older by comparison, but it's like there's something like if you saw the pencils for these pages, they're gorgeous when you look at them. You know what I mean? There's so
yeah,
much detail on them. They look so fantastic. Like, you know, like something like this Kirby machine being destroyed and all of its parts, you know, laid
yeah.
on top
That's
of each other
awesome.
and all those
Yeah,
layers. Yeah, stuff like that. You know what I mean? Like if you were to see the pencils for that, it's probably shockingly good. And like there's
I
little
think
things
that's
that like,
shockingly good.
yeah, dude, like the art, like this looks great, but I bet you the inks are, you know what I mean? Like they diminish these characters down here by coloring them wrong, right? You know what
Yeah,
I mean? Like
yeah,
they're orange against a yellow background
yeah,
with red
yeah,
lettering, you know, and it's like they turn them into a part of the machine debris is what they end up
yeah,
looking
yeah,
like to your naked eye until you stop and look at it, you know what I mean? And
yeah,
then there's not
yeah.
even like they don't even have like gasps coming out of them for you to for your eye to catch it, you know, because if there was like a bubble down here telling you that these figures are saying something, your eye would at least be drawn to it, you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah,
But over
yeah,
here, but it like, you know, like the idea of it overwhelms the art. Like there's so much art
yeah,
happening there, but it's so easy for you to just disregard that, you know, and just be like,
yeah,
oh, you know,
yeah,
there's that, and there's this. But these things, they take so much time and they're just really beautiful. And, you know, I mean, he just is a consummate guy. Can you imagine, like, dude, like it's how much time does it take to sit and draw that a panel like that with that much detail? You know, it takes a
He
day
but
sometimes, you know what I
he's
mean?
drawing 3 comic books a month.
I know, and that's wild
How
too,
did you
right?
do that?
Dude,
How would anyone do that? I don't care
him
how
and
fast you are.
him and John Byrne both were like those, you know, knocking out those insane numbers like that. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
wasn't John Byrne doing like X-Men and Avengers and something else? And George
yeah,
Perez
yeah, I
was
think
that
so.
way too. You know, he's
Yeah,
doing like 2 or 3 books. You know what I mean? A month. I do not know how these guys could do that because, like,
yeah,
I'm like, you know, dude, like it's like they have sponges that can soak up a swimming pool. Is all I can think. You
yeah,
know what I mean, dude? Like, because like
yeah,
my sponge, you know, brain is like after I draw a page or two, my sponge is bone dry. You know what I mean? Like
yeah,
I might have to like wait 2 or 3 days, maybe even sometimes a week before I have something in there again, like, you know, that I could draw on, you know, like it could really be hard for me to like just lay down and do page after page after page after page. And even then, you know what I mean? Like, dude,
yeah,
just like how do
yeah,
you keep up? You know, like
yeah,
say if
yeah,
you're not writing all of it and really understand it, like how do you not get lost in the storytelling moments and make sure you left enough room for this, or did you
yeah,
address
yeah,
this thing right? You know what I mean? Like I don't even understand how they could do it on that kind of level, you know. But
yeah,
like they
yeah.
just developed a formula that worked and just ran it, you know, like a
Yep, yep.
machine, you know.
And they're doing it Marvel method, so the writer isn't any help whatsoever. They're like, you know, go draw me an issue of the X-Men. Oh, okay. And then he
Yeah,
comes back with it, and
it's
Stanley
like
adds all of his crappy
Magneto's
dialogue.
pissed off and he's going to come into the, you know, X
Right.
Mansion and mess stuff up. And then Jean Grey and, you know, Professor X yell at each other and then it ends. You're
Yeah.
like, okay, like that. I'll go draw that, I guess. And then, like, you know, and then they're just going to
Yeah.
sit there and make up the words or whatever. But, like, there's so much writing on these things sometimes. Like, I can't even understand how all this could just be, like, vaguely Marvel method. Because, like, say, even, like, you and I, like, you know, how, like, I'm writing the story we're working on right now, but we plot all of it together. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
So, and then it's not even just that we go, oh, this happens, this happens. You know, we plot all the story things. You know, like
Yeah.
everything is
Yeah.
like discussed and worked on. So you know, there's no like, oh, just whatever here or whatever there, you know what I mean? Like, you know, it's very tied down, like story moving along, you know, moment by moment or whatever. And it's
Yeah.
like, I don't see how you could get like some of these stories they come up with so loosely, you know what I mean? Like the way they did, you know. But I
Yeah.
guess that's why
Yeah.
some of it seems like so wild and like crazy sometimes or whatever, you know what I mean? Like,
Well, they were writing and drawing for a different generation. They're writing and drawing for kids, and they knew it, and we're not. So I mean, that's quite a different approach. This stuff might be we might feel like it's not as for kids as some of the other stuff. But then you can take a lot of liberties when you're working for something for children.
yeah, I guess
Like
that's true.
although I mean, all of this stuff is really story wise. It's very clear and concise, and narrative art wise, I think Jack Kirby is definitely one of the best. But one of the things about Jack Kirby is, I think, like we're saying that he's probably the greatest creator. I think he's probably has the biggest imagination
Dude, he
out of
does.
all out of
He
all out
does.
of all
Like right
creators.
here in this panel right here, like on the top, it's literally like a mass, like it's a society being forced to build this massive space gun. So what you're seeing is
Right.
like, this is like New York City skyline or something, right? And then there's this just massive, like it's gonna like Nerf gun this rocket into space or whatever, you know what I mean? Just
Yeah.
built
Yeah.
right in the heart of the city, you know, like, dude, he has the wildest imagination, you know, like it's so huge.
And like we were saying, like we talked about, I don't think Stan Lee was much help.
Right, right, yeah.
So
Well, like you said, those guys come from the era of like the pulp magazines, you know what I mean? And
yeah, yeah,
that
yeah,
stuff is pretty
yeah,
wild and over the top, you know, it can be, you know. And I mean, like you see it in Marvel because like that's one of the things that really defines Marvel from DC is the idea that Marvel is this like sort of pseudoscience gone wild universe, you know. Whereas DC characters are more like, you know, the Greek gods or something. They're more like
yeah,
they're
yeah,
imbued beings that, you know, have these like, you know, great like destinies or whatever. But like the Marvel characters are like just like me and you, but they've all
yep,
got, you know, some shot of juice that turned them, you know, that gave them an extra punch or whatever, you know. Maybe the
yeah,
closest one to a DC guy would be Thor, you know.
yep, yep, yep. And I mean, that's why Kirby made New Gods. He had already played with his Thor and his old god, so he
Yeah.
wanted New Gods. And they're, like you were saying, they are born that way. They're not, they weren't made.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
I mean,
definitely.
his whole approach to that stuff like gets so profoundly like, you know, good and evil and biblical and, you know, God and the devil and all that stuff. And I mean, come on. I mean, the guy created Darkseid, you know, like it's pretty, you know, prolific work. You know what I mean? Like, you know, think
Yeah,
like
yeah.
you got
I mean, definitely.
Fantastic Four and Darkseid, you know, both under your belt, you know, as creations. So, you know, yeah, that's
I
pretty
would
wild
say
stuff.
so. For Marvel, I would say he created 80% of the characters. Would you say?
Yeah, gosh, I mean, yeah, for
You
at
got to you got
least
to
you
think that.
think, you know, what I mean, like, yeah. I mean, the only other guy who created that much and gave away that many characters, or I mean, obviously not that much, but the only other guy that like pops into my head that really created a lot and really gave away would be like Liefeld or whatever, just like created
See,
prolifically and
even then, what characters did he create? He created Deadpool
well, like
and
Deadpool, what's his name, freaking Cable,
Deadpool,
uh,
Cable,
that Zero
those
guy with the
Those
O
X
for his
Force
face.
characters. You're talking
Thumbelina, you know what I mean? Like
you're talking maybe a dozen characters.
Shatterstar, you know. I'm just saying, like, yeah, I'm just saying, like, he's, you know, there's not too many people that created that much and gave that much away. You know what I mean? Like, the only other guy, probably, like I said, but even coming close would be Liefeld, and like his isn't nearly as prolific as what.
Not. I think not.
Yeah,
I think not even
not
close. Like I
even.
said, he's maybe got a dozen characters or so, whereas Kirby has like hundreds,
You know, but
literally hundreds and hundreds of characters.
the thing though that changes the balance on that for me just a little bit is that like, you know, say like in Kirby's time, that was just the business of the day. You know what I mean? You just created and gave away, and it didn't really, no one ever cared because no one really thought anything of this stuff or it really considered that it was going to be anything. You know, that's why they just
Yeah. Yep.
made up all those monsters like Mumbo, the mumbling monster, and you know what I mean? And like
Yeah.
every
Yeah.
month it would just be a new Grand, you know, from the ground or whatever, you know,
Yeah.
like all
Yeah.
this,
Or
you know what I
or
mean?
like Stilt Man.
Yeah, yeah, no one cared because it was just nonsense. So they just made this
Yeah.
stuff up to it and walked away. But at some point, all those things started to become valuable, you know what I mean? And then you were like, oh, you know, now I'm giving this stuff away or whatever, you know, like, and
Yeah.
I think like Liefeld was just like right on the cusp of between those times where it was like he was still approaching it like an old Marvel, you know, perspective, like, oh, I'll just make all these things up, and you end up giving them all away, and then they all end up being like very valuable or whatever, you know, like
Yeah.
so like his stuff was probably, you know what I mean? Like obviously if Jack Kirby had like was in a time where that kind of stuff was happening, his stuff would have been insanely valuable. It's just like the Schuster, Joe Schuster and frickin' Jerry
Yeah.
Siegel giving up Superman for a song and a dance, you know what I mean? And then
Yeah.
getting the
Yeah.
pension of a janitor at the end of it, you know, and being, you know, considering themselves like lucky or creators. Like they should have been, you know, insanely wealthy, you know what I mean, from their
Yeah.
creation. Like,
Yeah. But
you know,
it's just like everything else. The corporation takes it,
yeah,
and
they
the
just
heads
got
of the
exploited.
corporation
You know
takes it
what I
all.
mean? Yeah, it just got exploited. So it's like, you
Yeah.
know, it's like that same thing. It just sucks that all those guys didn't get to, you know, didn't get to do what Todd McFarlane did with Spawn, or didn't get to do what, you know, Eric Larson did with Savage Dragon. You know, like
Yeah.
they should
Yeah.
own the rights. The characters should belong to them. Every story should have been theirs. You know what I mean? And you know, that's what's
Yeah.
rad. You know, like when you
Definitely.
read, like we went over some Spawn stuff recently, or not that long ago, and you know, I was one of the pages we were looking at is like that Alan Moore thing, or no, it's not Alan Moore. It's or maybe it was Moore. No, I don't think it was It's the one where Cerebus takes him down to Hades, and
Dave Tim. No.
yeah, yeah. Dave, what's a Dave? I wasn't sure if Dave Sim wrote that one, but I was
Yeah.
not
Yeah. Because
sure.
that's his character.
That's the creator-owned episode where they
Yeah.
see all the heroes locked in the cage or whatever, you know, and
Right.
he looks
Right.
inside the biggest cage, and it's Superman sitting in there, you know, and he's locked up, and you know,
Right. Right.
and you know, Spawn goes back to his house at the end of the dream, and you know, Wanda's there, and little baby Cyan's there, and he's like, "Oh, you'll get to live your whole life and have all these adventures because your owner never gave you away or whatever." You know what I mean? And he's
Yeah.
like, "All those guys are locked up in there, and they belong to something else because like their owners accidentally were tricked out of them." You know, and it's just like
Yeah.
super sad.
Yeah, yeah, yep, definitely. I mean, even like that, you were talking about McFarlane, and that we were looking at him, and we were looking at Eric Larson, and even if you don't like McFarlane's art, you got to appreciate his what he did for comic books, and
Oh
they're
yeah,
neck
both
and
are,
neck.
yeah.
They're neck and neck.
Well, they're both great artists. You know what I mean? Like at first, I wanted to like, you know, I'm actually glad by you know mid accident that I had found that you know Eric Larson, because I was looking for I was looking for an earlier
Yeah,
episode. You know what I mean? And his art had gotten better by then. Like the one I showed was like number 26, issue 26, and it is the death. That issue is the death of one of the main villains, the Overlord character. So we're seeing
yeah,
that, you know, in that issue we saw the spectacular, you know, ending. You know what I mean? Like it's almost like say the Six Lords of Sound is like an issue like that where it's like I didn't write 26 issues before it, but you're seeing essentially like the 15th or 20th issue of a story that's already been on for a long time, but you're just seeing the end of it and it's real spectacular or whatever.
yeah,
Um, so it's like I got to, you know, like you're looking at a comic like that. So I have no reference for what's happening before it. So everything I see, because it's a spectacular ending, it looks very spectacular to me. You know, I mean, it's clearly that this is a heightened moment or whatever. And he really draws that all out. And it's fantastic looking. So I can definitely see why he's giving Todd a run for his money. Although at first glance, I would have said no. I would have said no, Todd's much better. But you know, as an artist coming back to it again and again, you have to really realize that these guys are all very talented dudes.
yeah,
What makes
definitely.
them special is that they all come at it with their own interesting angle, and you can't, you know, you cannot negate that kind of talent and that kind of ability. You just have to sit back and honor it, and just you know
Yeah,
be glad
yeah.
that they spent their lives, you know,
How long has Savage Dragon gone on?
30 years or something like that now. You
Yeah,
know?
Yeah, and he's the only one that has drawn it, right?
Yeah,
Drawn
that's the
and inked
thing,
and
man,
everything.
is he is drawn it, dude. It's like OCD at this point, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
He's just got a bad case of obsessive compulsive disorder, man, drawing that thing for 30 years like that, you know? But we all benefit from it, you know what I mean? Like how is that any different than Charles Schultz doing, you know, Peanuts his whole life, or you know what I mean?
Well, I don't know. I can't knock daily strips. It's pretty hard. But
That's what I mean. Like,
I'm a comic book guy, so I'm gonna go with the comic book guys over
no,
a
I'm just
strip
saying, like,
guy.
it's not like anyone was out there going like, "Oh, well, you're the creator of Peanuts; it's hugely successful," or you know, "You're the creator of Garfield; it's hugely successful. How many more, you know, huge things are you going to create now?" You know what I mean? It's like none.
Right.
This is it. I'm just going to work on this for the rest of my life. You know what I mean? Like, I created Calvin and Hobbes. When Calvin and Hobbes is done, I'll be done. You know, like,
Yeah.
you know, you
Yeah.
got to respect that. You know what I mean? Like, that's pretty awesome because so many artists out there, you just get, you know, you're a whirlwind. You're just a whirlwind working for a lot of different things. And you get someone like Jorge Jimenez, whose art is really gorgeous. He's one of DC's really top producers right now. You know, he works on, you know, a lot of different books at any given time. He's incredibly fast. He's incredibly talented. But I really wish he would, you know, he would stop for a minute and give me a Jorge Jimenez comic book. You know what I mean? Instead of just
Yeah.
doing Superman and Batman and all that stuff, which is fantastic and which I love that he does, because you know I'm so inspired by what he does, you know, and like I don't think I would be doing the Entropy Alliance books with you right now were it not for how inspiring like some of his work and like Olivia Coipel and those guys look on the Justice League stuff. You know, it's like hugely influential to me right now. But I
Yeah.
still would love to see what he would do and what he would create for himself as a creator. You know what I mean? That's
Yeah.
really what I'd
Yeah.
like to see.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's all about there's some artists that are just inkers and you'll never see their penciled work, but they're fantastic artists, but they're inkers. So it's it's a weird comic books is a weird thing. That's for
Yeah,
sure.
you know, I mean, Walsh Portacio started as an inker, and just look how an
Yeah.
amazing artist he grew into. You know, Scott Williams started as an artist, and look what amazing inker he became. You know, freaking like, I mean,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
it's
So,
a tricky
all right.
business, man. It's a lot of hard
Yeah.
work, and you know, it takes a lot of dedication. You spend hours and hours and hours doing this stuff, dude, and you know, writing all this crap. You know what I mean, and hoping anybody gives a crap about it. You know, like dude, like you know, just the page like I'm working on right now, just to give you a level of, like the dialoguing. Like I don't know if you can see this
Look
stuff,
at that.
but like
Look at
you know,
that
it's just
dialogue. Holy
yeah, it's
moly.
got dude, you know, I've never written something like this before. It just like, you know, it just blows Six Lords of Sound away in every way because it's just like it's trying to deliver such a realistic story with so much realistic concept while at the same time delivering an over the top paradigm, you know, that superheroes
Yeah.
belong in and stuff. You know what I mean? Wait till you
Yeah.
read it, dude. Wait till you read it, man.
I'm sure
I'm
it's going to be awesome.
I'm just like, you know what I mean? I hope I'm not like, I hope I'm landing, you know what I mean? The triple Lindy here or whatever, you know.
Yeah.
What was that
Yeah.
dive that, you know,
Uh,
from, you know, Rodney Dangerfield in the movie where he's a diver or whatever and goes back to college?
oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Remember the triple Lindy or whatever,
Yeah.
that three-tier dive he had to do with him or whatever, you know?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think that's what like getting a good comic book feels like. You know what I mean? Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You got to
Definitely.
do so many different things to land it. You know, like you got to do
Yeah.
three
Yeah.
different triple. You got to ink it right. You got to letter it correctly. You got to get it drawn. You got to come up with a story that's engaging. You know,
It's a process. It's
yeah, it's
not
a
an easy
three-ring
process.
circus.
That's why I really try hard. It's sometimes it's difficult because you come across an artist and they're not your thing, and you think that they're not doing the things that you like, and there doesn't look like maybe they're putting much effort into it or whatever. But it's really hard to judge because comic books are so extremely hard to do, and a lot of people's tastes are different, so you never know what is good and what isn't good compared to what somebody else likes. And that's why I try to never say negative things about an artist. But
Oh,
it's
for sure. I mean, and you just, yeah, because like you never know, like they might be insanely talented and could do all kinds of different styles, and you might just be discovering doing a style that you don't really gel with or
Yeah,
something like that. Like you
yeah.
might look at him and think like, oh well, this is his entire, you know, ability on display. But you just never know. Like that guy who would do the Trencher book, whose like name isn't coming to my head like right off the back, but
Keith Giffen. Is that Keith
yeah,
Giffen?
I think that might be it. And it's a
Yeah.
very unusual style, but he could draw really well, and he could draw all kinds of different
He
styles.
could.
You know what I mean? Like,
He's such a varied artist. He can do pretty much anything. Yeah, he started
yeah,
doing that venture after he was working with the guy that we looked at from the Justice League, McGuire.
yeah. So you
And
know, I
he
mean,
was trying to like emulate that style a little
right.
bit, and
He's
then
got ability
it
to
went
do
into his
very
own.
realistic work and stuff. You know, I mean, he's one of those guys that can get all that small stuff into the panels and all that kind of thing. You know, and
Yeah,
you might discover him on Trencher and think like, oh, this guy's some like generic wannabe weirdo thing or something. You know what I mean? Like you just never know where you're finding an artist in their art of like, you know,
yeah,
discovering themselves. You look at early, you know, Bill Sienkiewicz stuff, and it doesn't look anything like his stuff now.
yeah,
You know, I
yeah,
mean,
yeah.
it's just, you know, it's Neil Adams looking in the very beginning. You know, but it's still fantastic. You know,
Yep.
like.
Yep. It's like I was saying about Jack Kirby. He had times when, you know, his books failed and people didn't want him. They didn't like his art or whatever. And he's
It's
friggin' Jack
insane.
Kirby. So, you know, you never know. But let's start wrapping this up. Talking about Jack Kirby, the king of comics. He really is the king of comics.
Yeah, Jack Kirby's incomprehensibly good, and you know we have to all nod our head to the incredible work he's done. The Fantastic Four movie, based on his, you know, entire sort of look and ideas coming out, and I hope it honors, you know, everything about, you know, his ideas. Fantastic Four is Jack Kirby's book. You know what I mean?
Oh
Like
yeah, definitely.
it is. I mean, like, you know, like say when I created Six Lords of Sound, I got the note of the idea from someone else. Like, you know, it was a magazine that was like, oh, hey, you know, we would like you to do a comic strip where like what they wanted me to do was like put people like, because it's like a Rolling Stone kind of thing, and it was out of England, and they
Yeah,
wanted me to take like the bands that they were featuring in any given month and put a little comic strip together, you know, where they would be in it, or, you know, they would be musicians, but you draw a little comic strip. And I was like, oh, that's a cool idea. I was like, but what if I did a comic strip where musicians were like superheroes, and like, you
yeah,
know, it was
yeah,
all about music or whatever. And he's like, oh, that would be cool too. And it was like, that's where the idea came from. You know what I mean? I was like, oh, that's a rad idea. And then I ran off and I did all the crap I did or whatever. But you know
yeah.
what I mean? Someone else placed that note in my head. He did not create any of that story or any of those characters or any of that stuff. You know what I mean? And I kind of feel like that's what happened with Fantastic Four. You know what I mean? Like Stanley came along and was just like, oh, you know, here's a very basic idea. And Jack Kirby was like, oh my God, that's rad. I'm going to do this.
I
You know what I mean?
uh, of all of the creations, because you know, Fantastic Four was when Timely was going under, and they were like gonna stop producing comic books. That was when Jack Kirby was like, "Well, I'm gonna do whatever the hell I want." I kind of feel like of all of the Marvel books that Stanley and Kirby worked on, I feel like Fantastic Four is the one that is all of Kirby. I don't think Stanley maybe did the dialogue and narration and stuff, which, you know, as we both say, is not very good. But I think Fantastic Four is all Kirby
Well, you know
as
what,
as far as I'm concerned.
the one thing I'll say is this, like, say, like, just like when you and I work together, like, we make up a big rad story and stuff, and we're coming up with all these components, but we also have like each of us have like a toy we're playing with, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like you'll
yeah,
have a character that you're manipulating, and I have a character I'm manipulating. I feel like in Fantastic Four, Mr. Fantastic is freaking Stan Lee. You know what I mean? Like
Stanley.
I feel like,
Yeah,
yeah, I feel like, you know what I mean? Like Mr. Fantastic is Stan Lee. It's like everything that Stan Lee thinks he is or wants
yeah,
to be or perceives himself as. You know what I mean? Like the way Stephen King writes himself into all his books. You know what I mean? Like
yeah.
all Stephen King books have a guy who writes books in them for some reason. You know, like,
Right.
and it's like I felt like Mr. Fantastic was like Stan Lee fantasizing of who he thinks, just like you know, Captain Kirk was a version of the guy who created Star Trek or whatever. You know, like that's
Right.
You know what I mean? Like that's who Captain Kirk was. It was a version of that. I can't think of his name right
Gene
now.
Roddenberry. Gene
Yeah, Gene
Roddenberry.
Roddenberry. You know, like so Gene Roddenberry is like writing himself into the stories as Captain
Yeah,
Kirk. You know, essentially.
yeah. We all kind of do that
Yeah,
anyway.
everybody does that a
As,
little bit, and
as
I
our
think like
creator.
I think like the Thing and like Sue and like Johnny. I think their dynamic probably all comes from Kirby. You know what I mean? All that stuff,
Yeah.
and I think the way that like Mr. Fantastic is always sort of out of the circle, and I think that's kind of why it's like based on Stan Lee a little bit. You know what I
Could
mean?
be. Could very well be. Could be like snarky, like Kirby saying, "Oh, Stanley, he thinks he's so fantastic."
Yeah,
You
yeah, it's
know.
exactly what it is. And Stan Lee
Could
just,
be.
buys into all of it because he does think that or whatever, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? And, and it's like, that's why, he's just like the doubting father, or like the dutiful father. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you have like
Right.
these two humans that behave human, and then like, Mr. Fantastic is always just like, no, get your stuff together. We have to, be our best versions of ourselves. Da 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 da. No arguing, Ben. And dude,
Right.
it's like,
Right.
but I mean, that's the stuff that makes things fantastic, and those are the things, it's the charm because no one knows that when you're reading it, until you become an adult and start to dissect this stuff at the level of like lunatics like you and I do. You know what I mean? And all that stuff becomes to like be slightly clear to you as you sit and pore over it again and again and again. You see the personalities of the creators like on display in the stories and as the characters. Like everyone knows that the Thing is essentially Jack Kirby. I mean, he talks like Jack Kirby. He comes from an old neighborhood like Jack Kirby. He smokes a big cigar like Jack Kirby. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
he's a short guy
And
with a quick temper.
yeah. 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 Pretty much. All right. So let's start wrapping this up. What do you got to show
All
us?
right. Well, I'm a creator of some original comic books, and right now Alexander and I are working on an amazing new comic book called The Entropy Alliance, and this is essentially the teaser for the very first story. This is the first issue, but we'll say this is more like issue 0, and we're building towards the very beginning of it now. Even though once the story starts coming out, you're going to definitely want to get your hands on issue 1 as well. I'm also the creator of Six Lords of Sound, Jim Starlin-esque inspired heavy metal superheroes in space in full color, no less. And I mean, come on, people, you know how hard it is to be a comic book creator and working in full color these days. It's just very difficult, like
Yeah.
it's just adding another layer of art to your art, because it's like even once you've drawn it, even once you've inked it, even once you've lettered it, even when you've written your story, then like how many times can you screw up a page coloring it? You know what I mean? Like it's so easy, like you could
Yeah.
be getting the whole thing right and then all of a sudden lay one color down and the whole thing is ruined. You know what I mean? Like I'm sure you've probably experienced that.
Oh yes.
Yeah, because you could
It's
just be
horrible.
going along.
It's the worst feeling.
Yeah, you could just be looking so good, so good, so good, and then all of a sudden you make a bad choice, and it's done. Like so.
Yeah.
Some of these pages, were colored multiple times. You know what I mean? Sometimes 3 or 4, or maybe even 5 or 6 times to get to the color scheme that I ended up on or whatever. So
Yeah.
don't fall asleep on full color comics like this, or like Alexander's Adventures of Morgrim the Cyclops. Fantastic stuff. What do you got going on over there, Alex?
I've got Random Access. It's a full-size, full-color comic book that I produce every month, and this is the cover by this previous month by Jeremy Duncan. And I often have different artists doing backup stories and or covers and backups and stuff like that. But you can get this full-color 12-page comic book at patreon.com/Alexander Turbin, or go to my website, alexanderturbin.com, or just message me on Instagram at alexturbin0441, or message me on email at alexturbin0441@yahoo.com.
Yeah, full
Yeah.
color comics, man, looking awesome right there. Oh,
Yep.
dude, and I also saw that cover of that. Was it Willie Draws that did that for you? Like the Death Knight cover that I saw on Instagram yesterday?
No, that's uh what's his name? Bertrand. Bertrand. I
Dude.
apologize. I apologize for having a brain cramp here. But Jeff Bertrand, yeah. And that's going to be in the next issue, and it's Death Knights, because it's part 2 of these this Death Knights reprint, because this was originally in black and white in Random Access
Oh
Volume
yeah,
1,
dude, for sure.
and then
It
I'm
looks
coloring
great
it.
in color.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So, and also Random Access is going to become a full-on anthology starting next month, and then the month after that, I'm going to be adding 4 pages this month, and then 4 more pages after that. So it's going to be full-on 20 pages of different artists and stuff like that. So stay tuned for more different Random Access.
Man, you know, that H.P. Lovecraft book was looking so good. I mean, all these covers are looking great, but man, that
Yeah,
H.P. Lovecraft cover is so cool. I love the pink on one side and then the green on the other.
I
You know what
know.
I mean? It just
It's
fully gives it
Jay
that
Quirk.
Lovecraft vibe.
Yeah, Jay Quirk. He's such a master. He's a
Well, I
master.
did. We're looking. This is also by, you know, this is also
Yeah,
by him. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
he's like, you know, if I could, I would have him color every cover I do. You know what I
I
mean?
know. I
Honestly,
know.
you know what I mean? Like I did this one myself, but you know,
And it's
I would,
awesome. It's
I
awesome.
would kill to have Jake do it though. You know?
He's just got some intangible thing that I
Yeah.
don't know.
What is the
You know.
French call it? The je ne sais quoi or whatever. That
Yeah,
certain I
yeah,
don't know what. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. He's just got an eye for color and an eye for everything. So yeah,
All right, you guys.
that's
Well,
big.
you've stuck with us to the very end. We thank you very much. You know, it really helps Alex push the algorithm out to other comic book minded people who might watch this show. Please give Alex a like and a follow. If you like, please leave a comment on the side so we can know what you thought about the show. We really appreciate it. Comments are always really, really appreciated. Don't forget to hit that thumbs up. And once again, this is Comic Books from Coast to Coast. I'm Joe Leo Leonardo. I'm hanging out with my buddy Alexander Turbin. And we're comic book creators. We appreciate other comic book creators. Our show is all about appreciating comic books and the people that create them. Thank you for hanging out with us today. Alex, why don't you give these guys their marching orders, and we'll get out of here.
As Joe said, thanks a lot for watching, and keep on creating.